One left behind a blood-stained sneaker on a forest trail. Another whispered a name moments before dying. And the last? His killer kept a souvenir for 30 years, until a house fire revealed everything. These aren't just crimes. These are cold cases that haunted Florida for decades. Forgotten files, broken families, and justice that almost never came. But thanks to one drop of DNA, a whispered memory, and a box of horror hidden in plain sight, the truth finally surfaced. And what we found was darker than anyone ever imagined. It was supposed to be just another morning jog. August 25th, 1984, Gainesville, Florida. A 21-year-old university student named Tina Resnick laced up. Her running shoes, told her roommate she'd be back by 10 a.m., and jogged off into the quiet shade of Bivens Arm Nature Park. She never came back. At first, no one panicked. Tina was known to lose track of time when running, sometimes stopping to sketch plants or read near the lake. But by noon, her roommate felt something wasn't right. By 3 p.m., she called police. And that's when things escalated quickly. Officers canvassed the trail, her usual route. The thick Florida brush made visibility difficult, but about a mile in near the creek they found it. A single white sneaker, still tied, soaked in blood. Beside it, drag marks in the dirt, leading deep into the woods and stopping. That was the first moment investigators knew. They weren't looking for a missing person. They were hunting a killer. But there were no witnesses, no sounds reported, no obvious suspects. Tina's family was devastated. Her father, a retired Army sergeant, flew in from Virginia that night and joined the search teams himself. For weeks, volunteers combed every inch of forest. Dogs, helicopters, drones, nothing. No body, no weapon, no trace. The case went cold for 37 years until March of 2021, when a fire broke out in a mobile home just 12 miles from the original crime scene. The blaze gutted the structure. Inside, firefighters found something that didn't belong. A metal lockbox, half melted, hidden behind a wall panel. Inside that box was something chilling. A newspaper clipping from 1984 about Tina's disappearance. Photos, a necklace, and a blood-stained bandana. The home had belonged to a man named Eldon Mercer, now deceased. No record, no prior arrests. Just a reclusive, soft-spoken maintenance worker who had lived alone for decades. The bandana was sent for DNA testing, using modern genealogy tracing. And what they found shocked everyone. The blood wasn't just Tina's. The other DNA strand belonged to Mercer's half-brother, Graham Lewis, who had recently been released from prison for an unrelated assault. Investigators reopened the case. They tracked down Graham, now 72, in Jacksonville. When confronted, he denied everything, said he didn't even know Tina. But when detectives showed him the photos found in the box, he went silent, then whispered, "She wasn't supposed to scream." That statement changed everything. Graham. Lewis was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. In his confession, he described seeing Tina jogging alone, following her into the woods, and panicking when she resisted. He admitted to stabbing her, and said his brother Eldon helped him hide the body. But here's the twist: he couldn't remember where they buried her. To this day, Tina's body has never been found. Still, the evidence was enough. In July of 2022, Graham Lewis was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Eldon Mercer, already deceased, was posthumously confirmed as an accessory after nearly 4 decades. Tina's parents finally had answers. In court, her father stood up and said, "We never gave up, and we never will. Not for Tina, not for any of them." But just as Florida was closing one cold case, another was about to break wide open, thanks to a whisper from the past that no one saw coming. The Babysitter Confession, Miami, 2003. It was a warm September evening in Miami, the kind where families barbecue in their backyards and kids ride bikes under the glow of streetlights. At exactly 8:43 p.m., a woman named Elena Ramos pulled into her driveway in a quiet suburban neighborhood. She had just returned from a late shift at the hospital. Her 5-year-old daughter, Camila, was supposed to be home with their babysitter, an 18-year-old high school graduate named Lisa Mendez. Elena unlocked the front door expecting the usual: the smell of popcorn, cartoons playing, her daughter laughing. But what she found was silence. The lights were off, the television was still on, showing static, and in the living room, Camila was sitting on the couch, alone. She looked up at her mother and simply said, "Lisa went outside and didn't come back." Elena's heart dropped. She rushed to the backyard, checked every room, called Lisa's phone, no answer. Panic set in. At 9:17 p.m., Elena called 911. By sunrise, Lisa Mendez was declared a missing person, but less than 24 hours later, her body was found face down in a shallow canal just 4 blocks from the Ramos home. She was still wearing the clothes she'd had on that evening. There were bruises on her arms, and clutched tightly in her left hand was a small silver cross necklace. It didn't belong to her. From the moment detectives arrived at the canal, something felt off. Lisa Mendez's body showed signs of struggle, scratches on her neck, defensive wounds on her hands. The medical examiner ruled the cause of death as asphyxiation, but there were no signs of sexual assault, no theft, no clear motive. And then there was the necklace. The small silver cross, clutched in her hand, wasn't hers. According to her parents, Lisa didn't wear jewelry often, especially not something religious. She wasn't very religious, but it looked like she had held onto it tightly, even in death. Like it meant something. Investigators collected DNA samples from under her fingernails. There was skin, fresh enough to be useful. Whoever attacked her had fought back and left a piece of themselves behind. The police quickly formed a list of suspects. First, Lisa's boyfriend, Ramon Diaz. They had been arguing days before her death, and neighbors claimed they heard raised voices over the phone. But Ramon had a solid alibi. He was working at a restaurant across town, confirmed by timestamps and video footage. Second, Elena's ex-husband, Camila's father. He had a history of alcohol abuse and had lost custody the year prior. But he hadn't seen Lisa in months, and phone records placed him hundreds of miles away. Third, a quiet neighbor named Joel Ruiz. He lived alone, no record, no alibi. But he also had no connection to Lisa beyond living 2 doors down. No motive, no evidence. Each lead ended in disappointment. The DNA collected was run through CODIS, the FBI's database, but no match was found. The necklace was examined for fingerprints, but nothing usable came up. Weeks passed, then months. The media stopped calling, and Lisa's face quietly disappeared from news cycles. But 10 years later, everything would change, thanks to a child's nightmare. 10. Years after Lisa Mendez's murder, the case file was gathering dust in a Miami Police Department archive. Until one night, Camila, the little girl Lisa had been babysitting, woke up screaming. She was 15 now, and for the past month, the nightmares had returned. Her mother, Elena, had tried everything: therapy, journaling, prayer. Nothing worked. Each night, Camila would wake up drenched in sweat, repeating the same line. "He had the necklace." He smiled at me. It didn't make sense. Camila was only 5 when Lisa died. She hadn't seen anything. Or had she? In a therapy session days later, Camila mentioned something strange. She said she remembered seeing a man in the hallway the night Lisa disappeared. He was standing near the kitchen, watching. Silent, familiar. The therapist alerted her mother. Elena, desperate for closure, brought this information to the police. At first, they were skeptical. A child's decade-old memory? But one detective listened. His name was Marcus Beltran. He had been with the force for over 25 years, nearing retirement. But something about the case had always bothered him, especially the necklace. When he reviewed the old crime scene photos, he noticed something. In the initial evidence logs, the DNA sample under Lisa's nails was marked as partial and contaminated, but lab standards had changed dramatically since 2003. What was unusable then might be clear now. Beltran pulled strings, sent the sample to a private lab in Georgia that specialized in degraded DNA. The results came back in 2 weeks, and they hit like a freight train. The DNA matched a man named Derek Collin. No one on the original suspect list, no criminal record. But he had lived in the same neighborhood as Lisa in 2003. In fact, he lived right across the street. And more disturbingly, he had once been close with the family. Elena's journal entries, preserved in a storage box, revealed that Derek had been a family friend. He often attended their church group, had even joined them for Sunday lunches, and just weeks after Lisa's murder, he moved away without explanation. The pieces began to connect. When Beltran knocked on Derek Collins' door in Tampa, over 200 miles from the original crime scene, he was met by a quiet, balding man in his 40s, calm, friendly. But when confronted with the DNA results, his smile faded. Under pressure, Derek didn't deny knowing Lisa, but he claimed he barely remembered her. That was a lie. Inside his garage, in a dusty box of old keepsakes, police found something chilling: a photograph of Lisa Mendez, cut out from a church newsletter, folded, creased, and stained with something dark. The final confirmation came when they showed Camilla a photo lineup. She didn't hesitate. Her finger landed on Derek's face. "That's him," she whispered. "That's the man in my dream." Derek Collin was taken into custody silently. No struggle, no words, yet still, he did not confess. For days, he remained silent in the interrogation rooms, cold, evasive, as if he knew time was on his side. There were no eyewitnesses. The DNA could be challenged. The necklace found beside the body, it was never officially linked to him. But then, evidence emerged that would change everything. During a new search of Derek's house, investigators found an old laptop buried in boxes in the attic. The data was corrupted, but a digital forensic team managed to recover fragments of the hard drive. Among broken files and family photos, there was something unexpected: a digital diary. It was a kind of veiled confession. Derek had written about temptation, about guilt, and one night when everything went out of control. No names were mentioned, no dates cited, but one entry caught attention. She was just a girl trusting me. I tried to resist, but when she screamed, something inside me broke. Afterwards, I knelt and begged for forgiveness. Confronted with the writings, Derek Collin finally gave in. Yes, he knew Lisa. Yes, he was at the house that night. Yes, he killed her. But what was most disturbing was not the yes. It was the coldness with which he described everything, as if telling someone else's story. In court, Elena, the child's mother, cried silently as the prosecutor read the diary aloud. Camilla did not attend. She chose to watch the live stream, locked in a room, clutching a pillow. When the judge announced the life sentence, Elena whispered to herself, she trusted him, and he destroyed everything. Derek was led away in silence, just as he had arrived. But the weight of his presence lingered over everyone in the courtroom, especially over Camilla, who finally had a name, a face, and an end to the nightmare that had haunted her for half her life. The souvenir killer. It was just after 9 p.m. in Tampa, Florida, on a muggy summer evening in June of 1991. Mark Sanders, a quiet 17-year-old high school senior, clocked out from his part-time job at a local hardware store. He waved goodbye to his co-workers, tossed his backpack over one shoulder, and started walking toward the bus stop like he always did. But that night, Mark never made it home. His mother, Linda, began to worry by 10:30. He was never late. He always called. By midnight, she was pacing by the front door. By 1 a.m., she was calling the police. The initial response was restrained. Teenagers disappear all the time, they said. Maybe he ran away. Maybe he was with friends. But Linda knew better. Mark didn't have friends he would disappear with. He didn't even own a car. He hated the idea of leaving his mom alone. He had college dreams, engineering, a future. And by morning, his backpack was found abandoned in a park about 3 miles from where he'd last been seen. The contents? His notebook, a half-eaten sandwich, and nothing else. His wallet and his newly bought pager were gone. But his ID and bus pass were still inside. Then, 3 weeks later, just when the case was beginning to stall, a small envelope arrived at the Tampa Police Department. No return address. Inside was a single item, a lock of reddish-brown hair, and a typed note that read, "He screamed." Detectives immediately thought it was a hoax, but lab tests confirmed the hair belonged to Mark Sanders, and just like that, everything changed. The media exploded. The story went national. Tips came in by the dozens. Psychics, self-proclaimed witnesses, conspiracy theorists. Some said Mark had been kidnapped by a cult. Others insisted it was connected to an underground trafficking ring. But none of it went anywhere. There were no suspects, no other evidence. No signs of Mark, alive or dead, and with each passing year, the mystery only deepened. After the envelope arrived, the Tampa police launched what they called a complete investigative overhaul. New detectives were assigned. Posters were reprinted. Neighborhoods were canvassed. Again. But despite the urgency, the trail had already gone cold. There were no fingerprints on the envelope, no fibers, no residue. The hair had already been confirmed as Mark's, but it didn't lead them to a suspect. No one reported seeing him that night. No one saw a struggle. There were no tire marks, no witnesses, no signs of forced abduction. The FBI stepped in briefly, considering it a possible interstate abduction. But even they couldn't crack the silence that surrounded the case. Mark's mother, Linda, never stopped looking. She printed hundreds of flyers every month. She showed up at city council meetings. She even appeared on America's Most Wanted, pleading for help. "I just want to bring my son home," she said during a televised interview in 1992, eyes tired, voice shaking. "Dead or alive? I need to know." Years passed. The case would surface briefly in the media, on anniversaries, in cold case segments, but never with any new developments. Detectives rotated. Leads dried up. Until eventually, the file was quietly pushed to the back of the cold case archive. Mark became another name in a long list of missing teens in Florida. Another tragedy without closure. And then, in 2002, over a decade later, a seemingly unrelated case reignited hope. A woman named Andrea Powell went missing just 10 miles from where Mark disappeared. Her car was found abandoned. No signs of struggle, just like before. But this time, a note was left. Typed. Just one line. She didn't scream. The eerie similarity to the note in Mark's case didn't go unnoticed. Was this the same person? Had the killer resurfaced? Investigators reopened Mark's case, but without DNA or solid links, they were left once again with nothing but shadows. It wouldn't be until 2022, 31 years later, that a fire, quite literally, would bring the truth to light in Itatan. Early 2022, a house fire broke out in a quiet neighborhood just outside Tampa, Florida. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a routine electrical mishap, until investigators entered the garage. Among the scorched debris, they found a rusted metal box, partially melted from the flames but still intact. Inside were items no one expected to find. A wallet, several faded Polaroid photographs, 3 braids of human hair, carefully tied and preserved. And one item that made a detective stop breathing for a second: a school ID card. The name on it was Mark Sanders. Fingerprint scan confirmed the ID was real. It belonged to the 17-year-old who had vanished in 1991, over 3 decades earlier. The homeowner was a man named Daniel Groves, a 62-year-old former long-haul truck driver who had lived a quiet, seemingly uneventful life. He had no criminal record, no major complaints from neighbors, just a man who kept to himself. But when investigators searched his house more thoroughly, they discovered something far more disturbing than the box in the garage. In a locked room, beneath a false floor panel, police found what they later described as a personal museum of the macabre. Shelves lined with boxes, each box labeled by a woman's name or a date. Inside were small souvenirs, a bracelet here, a lock of hair there. In total, authorities recovered over 40 items believed to be linked to at least 6 different cold cases, all involving missing persons across Florida from the late 80s and early 90s. The forensic team prioritized DNA testing on all the items, and within weeks they had match confirmations. One braid of hair belonged to Mark Sanders, another to Rachel Monroe, a woman who vanished in 1989. The third belonged to Angela Dunn, a nursing student who went missing in 1993. But the shock didn't end there. In the photos found in Groves' hidden room, some of the victims appeared alive, but unconscious, bound, bruised. The images were blurred and dark, likely taken with an old film camera. Authorities never released them to the public, but one detective later said he kept them as trophies, like they were his twisted version of family portraits. The case turned from a tragic cold case into a full-blown serial killer investigation. And the most haunting part? The man who committed these acts lived undetected for more than 30 years, right among everyone else. When confronted with the evidence, Daniel Groves at first said nothing. For days, he sat in silence during questioning. Then, something changed. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe it was the weight of decades of secrets finally collapsing in on him. Groves began to talk. His words were flat, emotionless, clinical. He didn't explain why. He didn't express regret, just facts. I watched them. I waited. It wasn't about sex. It was about control and silence. He described stalking his victims, most of them young, isolated, and predictable in routine. He would follow them for weeks, take notes, memorize their schedules. He admitted that with Mark Sanders, he had seen the boy closing up at his fast food job. He always left through the alley, Groves said. No cameras, no one watching. That detail had never been released to the public. Groves said he had no intention of killing Mark, but he fought harder than I thought. So, I kept something of his. When asked about the other victims, he would only say, "They're gone. You won't find them." Psychologists later suggested Groves fit the rare profile of a trophy killer, a type of predator who doesn't kill out of passion, revenge, or impulse, but to possess something, to freeze a moment in time and hold it forever. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, and while the full number of his victims may never be known, investigators believe there could be at least 6 more connected to his collection. At sentencing, the mother of Mark Sanders stood in court and said, "For 30 years, I didn't know if my son was suffering. Now I know, and now I can finally bury him." Although Mark Sanders' case was now officially closed, the echoes of Daniel Groves' crime stretched far beyond one victim. As forensic teams analyzed more of the items from Groves' hidden cache, they began working to match each souvenir with unsolved cases throughout Florida and nearby states. His legacy of horror wasn't over yet, but something else was just beginning. The FBI created a dedicated task force to link Groves to missing persons cases from 1985 to 1995, when his trucking routes were most active. Several families came forward with renewed hope. One of those families belonged to Michelle Avery, a 19-year-old waitress who vanished in 1992 after a late-night shift. Her mother, Evelyn, had held onto a photo of Michelle every single day for over 30 years. When a locket found in Groves's collection tested positive for Michelle's DNA, Evelyn finally got the answer she'd waited decades for. All this time I thought she was just gone. But now I know. Someone remembers her. Someone cared enough to find the truth. Michelle's name, along with Mark's and the others, was added to a new memorial in Tampa dedicated to cold case victims. For the families, it wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about peace. Law enforcement officials called Groves one of the most chilling examples of a hidden predator in U.S. history, someone who operated in plain sight, undetected for decades. "The lesson here," said one detective, "is never give up. Cold cases don't mean forgotten cases." And now, with DNA, genealogy, and renewed attention, Michelle's story, and the stories of so many others, are finally being told. 3 different stories, 3 different lives. But one thing connects them all: decades of silence, shattered by truth. Jane never made it out of that trail in Tallahassee. Lisa never got to finish high school. And Mark, his screams were buried for 31 years in a steel box no one knew existed. Yet somehow, against time, doubt, and fading memories, justice found a way. Today, thanks to advancements in DNA, the persistence of loved ones, and the tireless work of cold case detectives, the dead are speaking again. And their voices are louder than ever. They thought no one would remember. They thought no one would care. They were wrong. Each of these families spent years trapped in a question with no answer. Now they can finally breathe, mourn, heal, remember. But it makes you wonder, how many more stories are still buried out there, just waiting for someone to look again? A box in an evidence room, a memory someone dismissed, a clue left in plain sight. Maybe justice isn't lost. Maybe it's just waiting. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Leave a comment below. Which of these stories impacted you the most? Subscribe for more real-life investigations from America's darkest cases. Share this video. Someone out there might know something, and you might be the reason justice is served. One more time.